Hello and welcome back to the Five Factors Podcast. I am Tal Prince and thrilled for a couple reasons. One, it's the opening day of baseball. This is great news, kids. Also, I'm here today with everyone's favorite Iron Man, Matt Adair. Matt, how are you?
Well, I'm going to actually you first off. Today, when we drop this, is not opening day, but it is opening day week. So you're jumping the gun a little bit early, but we're coming. And here's how I know it's not
I'm that
because
excited.
Thursday, I am taking a half day and I am going to observe Sabbath, which is what we're talking about today. And I am going to hang out with my buddy Will, and we're going to spend a half day watching the Cubs game, my favorite team, the Cardinals game, his favorite team. And yeah, we'll have a good time just kind of hanging out doing that. So I am doing well. I'm excited about Thursday and the beginning of opening day. How are you?
Well, I'm doing fine. And up until a few seconds ago, I liked Will, but then you said Cardinals fan, and now I'm challenged. I need to pray through that. I need to pray and ask Jesus to love Will through me.
He is an alien because he is a massive Cardinals fan. I mean, he wears a Tommy Herd jersey and
Wow.
And is part of a Cardinals podcast. But he's not a jerk about it, and I don't. He's like breaking my paradigm, so I don't know how to live this out.
If you say this is so, then maybe I like Will.
I know I'm describing a unicorn, but they exist.
You are, man. That's Peter Pan territory right there. But okay, if you say so, I'm going to go with you. And I've not met Will so yet, but I'm sure that'll happen. But you teased here a second ago that we are going to talk about Sabbath, and really what we want to get at today is how to keep you all from working so darn much. How can we help you slow down and take time for yourself? And we've got some interesting information as to how we know you're working too much. Matt, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so every time somebody does research on this, what we find is that related to pastors and church leaders, more than half of pastors work more than 50 hours a week. And so the good news is it's getting better, but it's still a lot. And the issue is not just the quantity of those hours, it's also the quality of those hours. That a lot of us are working a lot of hours in which we're under stress, in which we are working interpersonally with people because we're in a place where we are counseling and helping and leading and developing and directing. We're doing sermon preparation. There's a lot at stake for us. We're not just showing up in a cubicle and clocking hours in our own silo, that we're really having to give ourselves away in a significant amount of ways. So that's a lot of hours to be under stress. And those extra hours really have a massive impact on our health. And so, as we've been talking about this, that it's not just that we're dealing with some of these kind of spiritual issues. So this is 5-factor type stuff, right? I mean, we're not just talking about spiritual issues, even though this is a spiritual reality. We're not just talking about relational issues, even though there's a relational reality to this. We're not just talking about the kind of the mental stress drain on you, even though that's real, or the physical stuff. Like, it all comes together. So I'm interested, Tal, in terms of, from a clinical perspective, what are some of the most significant issues that you see resulting from people who are overworking?
People that are overworking very often, the fact of the matter is they might well be workaholics. This is how they're dealing with discomfort. This is how they're avoiding other issues in their life, is they stay too busy, stay too overscheduled, because in a lot of ways it's possible to schedule conflict out of your life. If I've got too many lunches this week and I know I've got two people that really need to have a meeting with me, but I keep my calendar too booked up, but I know these two people that need to have a meeting with me, I want to confront me about something, I can busy myself right up. So I can use my work to medicate. I can use my work to avoid. And so that's something that I see a lot of. It also leads to a great deal of depression and burnout and compassion fatigue. It can also lead to anxiety, depending on your personality type, right? If you're an extrovert and you extrovert too much, you're working too hard, you're being around people too much, that comes out as anxiety. If you're an introvert and you isolate much and you're by yourself too much, that turns to depression. But you can be by yourself and working, right? Because we're quote unquote in the study, and we're working on the message for Sunday. And because we learned in seminary that if you don't have an hour of study per minute of sermon length, then you've not done your work, and you don't need to go into the pulpit, kids. Which is why many of you go online and steal sermons on Saturday night. But neither here nor there. So
different episode, different day.
Yeah, but that's what I specialize in, teasing future episodes. But so these are things that I see, and I also see addiction, and I see broken marriages or fractured marriages as a result of people working too hard, too much, and really at the end of it, very often what I see is ministry staff are avoiding problems with their spouses by overscheduling themselves and staying away. There's kind of escaping stuff at home, and it leads to major issues. But burnout, compassion fatigue, avoiding conflict, these are the kind of the big things.
I would also say that if you're part of a church staff that is largely or almost exclusively male on kind of that sort of executive management, lead pastor, kind of directors, that type of role, my guess is that it's a hyper competitive environment, and there's some sense, even if you never talk about it, about who's working harder than somebody else. It kind of is like when you hear this in a sports analogy about that guy is the first there and the last to leave, and there's some way that we think that is really, really healthy. And so what I hope that you hear us saying is that if you're overworking, not only are you breaking yourself down, you're probably breaking things around you and breaking people around you. And there really is an entire ecosystem here. You're not dealing with the stuff that is broken around you or inside of you. And so you're just making it worse by overworking. Now, here's the thing that I want to make sure, because when we come in and say we want to help you stop working so much, there is no singular magic number that says this is too much. No. That's going to be different, even conceptions for different people. We were talking about this earlier. One of the things I know that was helpful for you early on when you were pastoring, doing all kinds of different stuff, counseling practice, all that type of stuff, is you determining how much time you were going to put into this. So talk a little bit about kind of the advice you took from Andy Stanley early on and how that was helpful for you.
Yeah, I heard him say, and it's a comment that is just echoed in my ears for a very, very long time. He said, I when he started North Point, I mean, he was telling the story that, he told the leadership team there that he would be the best pastor he could be in 40 hours a week. But outside of those 40 hours a week, they were going to need to find somebody else. And that really struck me and stuck with me in a way, because pastors are the people that people do not mind calling at 8:30, 9, 10, 11, 1, 2 in the morning, at night. They don't mind. They're not going to call their banker because their checking account statement is wrong, but they'll call you. And for him to set that type of a boundary was a strong statement to me. He protected his family in that, protected his own time in that, made sure he was having enough time to rest, to play, to hang out, and to connect with his family. And that's really, really critical. All the research shows that, most ministers' spouses absolutely hate the job. They hate being a part of it. They don't like it. Because, and this is one of the major issues, is there's no professional boundaries set. There's no time off. And now you add to that technology and the smartphones. I mean, when Andy said that years ago, we didn't have an iPhone yet. As most you had was a beeper. For those of you old enough to remember what that device was like. But the smartphone and texting and constant email, most of us go home and don't ever unplug, right? I mean, we don't shut the devices down. We don't, we're always accessible, and we think that is showing our people that we care, when in fact the opposite may be so.
Yeah. Here's the modification I've made on that, because, as I was thinking through that and having some conversations with people, one of the things that they said is, that sounds great. You also have volunteer leaders in your church who go and work a full-time job and then come in and work in the church. So have y'all figured
Right.
out what that should look like? And I'm like, yeah, anybody who's volunteering in our church, we don't want them volunteering more than 5 hours a week at most. And he said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so how about this? You take 40 hours and basically add that 5 hours on that somebody's going from their full-time job, investing 5 hours in the church. And when you make that modification, which is something that we've done over the past, 5 or 6 years, that's kind of my expectation for myself now. Being full time at the church is 45 hours a week, and seeing how that works itself out. So what I'm trying to do is go, hey, I'm in there with y'all. Y'all go to work, and then you come here, and we do stuff together and help on the church. And so I'm certainly not trying to get away with less, but I'm also not trying to get away with more. There's a conversation that we're going to continue to have with y'all, and we talk about this in our 5 Factors coaching programs about if you are a pastor or ministry leader who is always on the clock because people need you, it's unsustainable. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but for reasons understandable and otherwise, you aren't making the investment in building a team of pastors around you. And it's going to take time. And I understand that some of us are in contexts where people look at you and they think you're the only one that counts. It's wrong. You may have to deal with it, and you may have to disappoint some people for a while. But you need to get to the other side of this, because unless you have other people helping you carry the pastoral load of your church, the amount of people that you can actually help is limited, and your effectiveness on any given day or for any length of time is limited. So I hope what you hear us saying is, if you are clearing probably 45 hours of work a week, you're redlining this for yourself, and we don't want you to hurt yourself, and we don't want you to hurt the people that you're trying to help. And so if you're sitting here and you're kind of you're in a car and you're talking back to us, hopefully you're not in public talking back to us, but if you're like, look, I can't do this, like I cannot take time off, or I'm not convinced that I shouldn't just play my hand well, it's better to burn out than to fade away. Thank you, Def Leppard.
Reference, kids.
That's exactly right. I give you a Bible. This is my response. Like, if you think that you're too busy to take time off, I give you a Bible. And so, again, the Sabbath principle that's there in Exodus chapter 20, my biblical theology says that because of Jesus, we're no longer under legal obligation to observe a Sabbath day, but there's wisdom involved in that. And I think the wisdom is that God made us to embrace our limitations. And so he encourages us to, work 6 days and take a day of rest, and to take a day where we move away from our normative vocation and allow him to continue that work while we rest from that work and remember that he's God and we're not. And so I think that's super, super helpful for me in trying to help not only myself, but my team embrace that as well. Tal, for you, as you think about, because this isn't just true for church leaders, this is true for anybody. Yeah. How do you see this? Like, how are you trying to work this out in your own life?
It's something I have to pay attention to, because workaholism is a thing for me. I know it all too well. And so I have to be very, very careful with it. And, I have to put some real structure around when I'm available, when I'm not available. A lot of times that means shutting things down, at home. It does create issues. But a lot of it comes down to really scheduling for me. The structure is what's critical for me. When I'm getting out of shape on this, it's because I don't have the structure. I'm not paying attention to my calendar. I'm not paying attention. I'm not evaluating. Wait a minute. How much time is that going to take? And, am I adding the extra time above my estimation because my estimations suck? It's going to take me an hour. It's going to take 3. Am I adding the extra time for that? And am I really cognizant of every time I'm saying yes to something, what am I saying no to? I have to ask myself that question a lot of, okay, if I say yes to these 3 more clients this week, what am I saying no to? Well, I may not be able to run. It sounds so mundane, but I might not be able to do carpool that week with the kids to school. Well, guess what? That puts a strain on my relationship with my wife, because now she's pressed in to more service on that, and I'm being insensitive to that because I wanted to work more. So these things become really, really important. So I have to pay a lot of attention to my calendar. I have to look at it really, really closely. And I have to have some other people help me look at my calendar and go, hey, 'cause, I mean, you hear this in the workplace a lot today. People like to talk about this kind of buzzword of work-life balance, and I kind of think that's kind of a fallacy. I think it sounds great, but it's not just a balance between those two, because for a lot of us, the issue is our work is our life, and that's an issue.
Yeah. For me, it's been more helpful to think about rhythm. And, when
Right.
people talk about, when I'm trying to help people work on multiplying their time, which I'm like, you can't manage time, it's going to happen without you. But how, are there ways that we can multiply it? And I just said, look, the biggest way for you to think through this is really in terms of three categories. You have your work, you have sleep, and you have Sabbath. And those, if you put those three things together, that's the building blocks of a healthy way to approach time. That you need to make sure that you're limiting the amount of work you do on any given day by the amount of sleep that you do. Now, I'll be the first to say that what I see with most people is not the fact that they're working. The reason that we're not sleeping is not because we're always working too much. It's sometimes because we are working too hard, and then we basically we just binge watch Netflix, and we spend a lot of time there. Like, there's a lot of time in which we could spend there. But in terms of the basics, we're talking about working, sleeping, and Sabbath. And what we're talking about in this episode specifically is how you kind of cultivate that day, at least a 24-hour period where you're going to stop working and enjoy rest. And Eugene Peterson, I love the way that he talks about the Sabbath principle, where he says that there are two things that are critical here when you read the scriptures, that it's both praying and playing. There's an element of prayer and worship where we're not just stopping to get physical rest, that we're rejuvenating ourselves spiritually. And that should happen primarily through the scriptures, but that's also going to happen in other ways that you connect with God, and you feel like you're listening to him and taking him in and seeing who he is and what he's created. And so for some of us, that's outside in creation. For others of us, it's working on particular hobbies and doing things like that. And it bleeds over into that playing element. But Tal, I know that there's different ways that people approach the idea of playing. For some people, when they think of play, it means something totally different to somebody else. So for people who are hearing this idea of Sabbath and go prayer and play, and they go, I don't do play. I don't, have fun. I mean, I could take a break, I guess, but I don't even know what this would look like for me. So help those people.
Yeah, well, there are more than a few of us who grew up in a context where play was not really part of our world. Whether we were pressed into adult service as kids, whether there's so many different things that can go on, or whether our family just didn't play, and so no one really taught us how to play. Guess what? You might need to learn how to play. And that's an intentional exercise. Find a hobby, find some different things, try some things, try different things. Don't worry about how silly it may sound or whatever. But if you have kids, they'll probably be able to teach you, unless you've not allowed them to play, and they don't know how to play either. Playing for them is reading a book and reading the latest J.I. Packer. Then you've got really major issues and you need to get help. And but start getting out and learning, what you like, find what you like, do some different things. Play is really, really critical. The brain loves novelty. And the brain loves new experience. And so playing does that. Playing also releases a lot of important neurochemicals that we need for pleasure, that we need for relaxation. So just neurochemically, the benefits of play are huge. And we need to be giving ourselves those. If we starve ourselves of those chemicals, then we're going to find them in really inappropriate ways, which is why a lot of us turn to porn, which is why a lot of us turn to drinking too much. And that's where these things come from, is we're trying to get that chemical rush from our brains that we would get if we just learned how to play. And play not necessarily means games. Here's an example. My wife loves board games more than anyone I've ever seen in my life. Guess what? I loathe them nearly as much as I loathe politicians. But it is something
Future
that I
episode.
yeah, again, that was I'm always teasing future episodes. I don't like them. I don't like them. But you know what? I play with them. And it's important for me to play those board games with the family. Why? Because it combats perfectionism in my life. That's really why I don't like to play them. I don't like to do things I'm not good at. And I don't like people to witness me doing things I'm not good at. So I need that experience, and I need to be able to laugh and relax and let it be and have a good time with it. But play can be cooking. Play for me very often is smoking several slabs of ribs. That's a great day for me. I love doing that. I'm serving my family. That's play to me. That's not work to me. For some, it's work. But sometimes play is going to the movies with the kids and going out and talking with them afterwards. That we're connecting, but we're having a good time. We're laughing. So play is not necessarily game or sport, but it can be. But find hobbies that you like that feed your soul, that are really enjoyable to you. I think at the end of the day, my favorite thing to ever do for play is if I can get out on a golf course late in the afternoon by myself. That is the greatest thing ever. That is just a wonderful place for me, because that combines for me praying and playing. I can walk. I can be praying between shots, and if you've seen me play golf, you understand why I'm praying between shots. It's just I'm out in nature. It's just relaxing. The colors are beautiful late in the afternoon. The shadows stretching across the fairway. But maybe you like hiking. Maybe you're that guy. Whatever it is, but you've got to do it because you need the neurochemical benefits of it. And you know what? Those that love you need the neurochemical benefits of you getting it as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've found helpful is somebody saying, look, if you're somebody who works with your hands all the time, then your day off needs to not be particularly physical. You
Yeah.
need to fire off other parts of who you are neurochemically and holistically. But I think conversely, for those of us whose job doesn't tend to be physical as church leaders, is that it's good to be able to go and do certain things where you're going to have to use other parts of who you are. And to take a break. So, the idea of playing for you being more reading, even if it's fun reading, doesn't quite do it. It triggers some different things, but not all together. Now, I'm not the guy who's got 15 different hobbies. But one of the things that I'm finding for me is on the days when I have to go out and help clean the garage, we actually have a car that we've had for a while that about a week or so ago, I decided, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're basically going to keep working on this car until I can give this to my 13-year-old when he turns 16. So cool. I know nothing about cars, but we're about to learn, and we'll see if we don't just break the whole thing apart. Why? But part of it for me is to be able to hand this over to Jonathan when he turns 16. But another part of it for me is it's going to have to be something that's going to take my mind and my energy off of the stuff that I'm doing the other 6 days. So again, that's the principle. Key. If you're trying to think Sabbath, that's the basic principle that we want you to get, is that idea of praying and playing. Now, that can be different for people. That can be spontaneous. That can be planned out, and you need to know who you are and know how that works. So for the person, Tal, who's pretty spontaneous with this kind of stuff, what would you encourage them to do as they think about this next week ahead, the next couple of weeks, and how they approach Sabbath?
Oh, if you're spontaneous, it's still going to come down to making sure. And this sounds really ridiculous to someone who's really spontaneous, but you kind of have to have some planned spontaneity in terms of I need to budget my time. This is an approach I suggest to a lot of clients of look at how many hours are in the week and let's back out sleep. Let's back out some of the things that you've got. And then, so then it's how much time of Sabbath do you need? How much time of praying and playing do you need to have? And at least making sure that time is allotted for at the beginning of a week.
Yeah.
So it can come whenever. It doesn't have to come in one big, huge block.
Yeah.
If it's like, hey, so then, I noticed Wednesday afternoon, I had a window. People that are spontaneous love to seize windows that pop up. So, okay, great. Just, right? So you spent 2 hours of Sabbath there. You went and you did something fun. You went and went and played some games. You went and played basketball, whatever. Cool. You can do it along the way. You don't have to have it completely anal retentively scheduled.
Yeah.
It's just, you got to know that you got to have it, and then be honest to evaluate at the end of the week. Did I get enough playtime this week?
Yeah.
Did I get enough Sabbath time? Did I get enough time? And evaluate that and be honest with yourself. And you may need to get some other involved, in your world to look at your calendar with you to go, did you get enough?
Yeah. And again, ultimately, we really believe that this is a spiritual habit and practice. Like this is about your spiritual health and embracing your limits.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody who isn't God, but we live under the shadow of God day in and day out. He's God, we're not, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it does
the spontaneous people tend to forget to take Sabbath and look back and find out that they forgot to do it.
Right.
Which is different from the well-planned personality.
Yeah. Yeah, and so both of these come together. So the well-planned person, the best way that I know to approach it, because again, so much of our work as church leaders does bleed over. It's usually not a 9 to 5 type of thing. And even if you're counting hours, the hours are goofy. You'll have nights and you'll have some meetings and things like that. So probably the best piece of advice would be, in the world we live in, especially how digitally connected we are, of having at least a day and a half where you really are, where it is rest and you are intentionally taking time away. So I know one of the things that is happening for me is that's Saturday for me, to the point that I am, with almost no exceptions, I'm not doing weddings on Saturday, and I'm in a college town. And we have other people who could do it. I would love to serve them. I just know how that works. If you ask me to do a wedding on Saturday, that means I'm not going to have Sabbath. It's just the way that my schedule works.
Right.
But I'm also trying to find another half day. I'm also trying to, and that's usually time with Lindsay when the boys are at school, where I'm trying to get some time with her, because that's for me, an incredibly valuable way to spend that time. So taking that day and a half and then making time for a couple things. One, to intentionally worship God in an extended way, different than what you would do normally day in and day out the other 6 days. Make time to do nothing. And to not feel like you have to be productive, and not feel like, so I'm going to go do this list of to-dos that my spouse has given me, right? And I think, again, intentional time to have fun and give yourself permission to do that, and work that out with your spouse, where there's an agreement that it is absolutely a win for everybody involved if you do that. The other thing I would say is, if you have kids at home, then all of your Sabbath time does not need to be parenting. That you need to at least carve out some of this time where you're not parenting, or you're not taking over for your spouse because they're with the kids all the time. You got to work this out. You got to work at it a little bit. Right. But Sabbath for you, Sabbath for your spouse, if they're the one who's the primary caretaker of your kids, you got to give them some time away from the kids too, or they're not going to experience this rest also. So, last thing here, I think, Tal, is if there are just some unavoidably busy seasons of life. People are dealing with, they might be dealing with starting a new church, starting a new initiative, and they just can't avoid it. So what advice would you give somebody who is in that place and their life is busy and they can't avoid it?
Yeah, I think very often, well, it comes down to this. You're going to make time for what you want to make time for. Just simply put, and there are a lot of, and I get this, I get this conversation in my office at least once a week. A couple comes in, first session. One of them says, well, the other doesn't have any time for me. And the other, rolls the eyes like, but I'm working so hard and I'm doing these things and I'm so busy and it can't be avoided. And I can't, and I tell everyone the same thing. You make time for what you want to make time for. Are there sacrifices to that? Or getting back to anything you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. Understand what you're saying no to when you're saying yes to something. So the unavoidably busy season, at the end of it, you need to watch and see, why is it that busy? And do you you kind of dig it being that busy? These are really hard questions to ask yourself, but do you dig it being that busy? Are you building kind of a codependent dynamic in your church where people are going to depend on you to do everything? And listen, I'm not talking at you. I'm talking with you. I've been there and I did that. I built a horrifically codependent system where everybody was dependent on me, which I thought was fantastic and wonderful until I realized I resented the crap out of everyone I was ministering to, which makes it really difficult to pastor.
Yeah.
You know, and follow Jesus's model on this. Jesus got alone all the time. You know, now he did have the ability to disappear that none of us really have, which comes in really handy. But, you know, for us, we need to be able to say, I'm going to get alone. And here's a great simple reminder for you. And I think of this every time I'm on an airplane. You get the safety briefing and they tell you, in the event of a drop in cabin pressure, oxygen masks will fall from the ceiling. And they will tell you, put your mask on first before assisting anybody else with theirs. And that's what it comes down to. If you don't put your mask on first, if you don't put yourself first to breathe, you're not going to have anything to help anybody with. Yeah. So Sabbath is really key. And I know there are times when it gets absolutely nuts and people don't show up and they need to get things done. And I know, and I've been there in my own, you know, my own pastoral career. I've been there working Billy Graham crusades. I've been there in so many different contexts where if I don't do it, it's not going to get done. And I'm fairly convinced now that that's just a great lie of the enemy. I'm not nearly as indispensable as I would like to believe that I am. And I have to put my own mask on first before I can help others, and just kind of think through that for you.
Yeah, no, that's good. And especially this week of Easter, which y'all thought we were just, you know, happy about baseball season. It is Easter week, and this is the most important week of the year for us as followers of Jesus. And this might be that unavoidably busy season for you. There might be a lot going on this week. And so Sabbath might be hard to get to. The two other things that I would say on top of that is when you're in those seasons, one, something is better than nothing. So find time somewhere to take a break and to really pursue genuine rest. And then second, know when you're going to get back to a normative rhythm. And so I think that's important, and for there to be an agreement with you, with your spouse, if you're married, to make sure that there is that agreement there that we're going to do this for this long of time. And then we've got to get back to a kind of a standard healthy rhythm where we're not acting like we're so unique and nobody understands us and we're just different than everybody else. So there you have it. That's Sabbath. It's more than a metal band, but we want to make sure that if you're listening to this, that you're able to be who you want to be as a leader, that you're able to thrive and lead at the highest level possible for the longest period of time.
I'm sorry, man. I can't get out of my head now for some reason. As soon as you said that, all I can see is Ozzy Osbourne going, "I'm the Prince of Darkness." I can't get it out of my head, man. Sorry.
That's great. You know, I'm just here to just for grins and giggles.
Prince of Darkness. So for those of you who want to dive deeper into this, we've got some resources for you, as we like to do here at Five Factors. Matt, why don't you tell people what we've got for them this week?
Yeah, if you go to fivefactors.net/Sabbath, then we're going to talk more about this. And so what we created was basically a resource that's going to go deeper in two ways. One, we're going to talk more about how you create a culture inside your leadership team that embraces Sabbath and rest. So this isn't just for you. These are for the people that you're serving with and leading as well. The second thing is really how to practice a posture of Sabbath every day at work. And I think it's really, really important. Something that I've been spending a lot of time on lately as somebody who wants to maximize every day. I think that we have to embrace our limits there as well. So there's a way that we can do that. So I think that'll be very, very beneficial because it's going to help your team and it's going to help you not just once a week, but really every day to embrace your limits and what God has given you.
So at the end of the day, here's the secret. You have limits. You must embrace them. And you must take care of yourself so that you can do that. Just understand you've got limits, and that's how this needs to go down. Matt, do you have any last words on Sabbath?
Yeah. I do, and I'm really trying to avoid some of them right now because we would end up going this for another 20 minutes
The Prince of
talking about,
Darkness.
yeah. So we're just going to let the rabbit go across the, yeah. Here's what I'd say is nobody expects more of you than you. Even if
Right.
you aren't the lead person and you have a boss and a supervisor and they're particularly demanding, I
Mhm.
promise you, whatever demands they make on you that you're frustrated with, you have higher demands on yourself than they do.
Yep.
And so please give yourself permission to not feel like you have to be impressive by
Mhm.
how hard you work. The truth of the matter is nobody's paying attention and nobody really cares.
Mhm.
Okay. What we do care about is you thriving as a human being. And
Yep.
what God cares about is you understanding that He's in control and you're not. And
Mhm.
so we really want you to just rest in that and to be able to believe that it's counterintuitive
Mhm.
to just basically go, if I will work hard and then take a genuine rest and enjoy the rest that I have in God because I ultimately belong to Jesus, then that's going to give you the best opportunity to thrive.
Absolutely right. So, just to wrap up, we want to remind you that you can follow each of us on Twitter. You can follow Matt at Matt Adair, or me at Tal Prince. That's simple. We do want you, if you wouldn't mind, go and rate and review the podcast. That's how we kind of get seen by more folks and get this message out to more people. And that's really important to us because we really believe in what we're doing, and we hope you do as well. That we're really trying to help people avoid burnout. At the end of the day, that's a big piece of what we're trying to do, because that is a major problem in ministry. And so, man, please get this to some of your friends, and you can also help doing that in a more passive way by just rating and reviewing the podcast. So please do that. Also, we take a look at the show notes, go through the resources there, subscribe to the podcast. Anything that we can do for you, please leave us a question. Interact with us in the Five Factors Facebook group. Interact with us on Twitter. Interact with us wherever you can, and we're happy to get back with you. So thank you very much for listening to another episode, and we will see you next week for yet another episode of the Five Factors Podcast.